The World Health Organization estimates that 10 million people die needlessly every year because they cannot get hold of life-saving drugs. For international health campaigners, a large part of the blame for this rests with multinational drug companies, who they say not only charge too much, but block the manufacture of cheaper versions of patented medicine. It is a heated debate taking place all over the world, but now it's coming to a head in Thailand. The American drug firm Abbott Laboratories is taking the unusual step of blocking the sale of all its drugs to Thailand, including its anti-HIV drug, to protest the Thai government's decision to manufacture copycat versions of some patented products. I'm Teymoor Nabili. In this edition of 101 East, we ask, which is more important, patents or patients? For most people, the debate over patents and generic drugs is an academic one, played out in the courts and in the media. But in Thailand, there are more than 500,000 people carrying the HIV virus and many millions more around the world for whom the battle is a much more personal affair. Howell Davis went to Chiang Mai in Thailand to hear the story of Im.
I've got 4 best friends, Fame, Wan, Gong, and Phai. I like to ride my bike with Phai. At school, I make Thai floating lanterns and bags, and we do drawing too.
Im is 12 years old, an apparently normal, healthy child. She lives with members of her extended family near the northern Thai city of Chiang Mai, but not with her mother or father. They both died of infections caused by AIDS when she was a baby. They'd already passed HIV onto her.
I'm sad. They stayed with me less than a year, and then they were dead.
Her own survival is a result of Thailand's antiretroviral drug program. Launched in 2003, it now provides drugs for around 80,000 HIV-positive people at minimal cost.
Before taking my medicine, I got sick very often. Now I'm getting medicines. I feel much better. I used to get headaches. I had a cough and flu, and I got itchy rashes.
The drugs keeping her healthy and active are generics, cheap Thai-made versions of products that were originally developed by international drug companies. It's estimated that almost 600,000 Thais are HIV positive. Before cheap antiretrovirals, the disease had a devastating impact, as Im's grandmother has seen it firsthand.
2 of my 4 children died from the disease. Im's father and uncle. And we have 2 other people in the house who still have it now. Im and her other uncle.
Im takes first-line medicines, older treatments, but effective for her. This child at the provincial hospital, who wished to remain anonymous, is not so fortunate. She's reacted badly to the old treatments and so needs newer, more expensive drugs. To cut the cost, the Thai government will copy them without the permission of the company that makes them. The doctor in charge of treating children here says that's crucial to allow treatment for all.
If we have to pay, if we have to use the licensing drug, that is expensive. So if we use it, the number that people can access the treatment quite limited and cannot expand to the general population that they need.
There are also fears that Thailand's declining HIV rate could begin to rise again, thanks in part to the booming sex industry. That could put severe financial pressure on Thailand's treatment program, increasing calls to copy licensed products. But the drug companies argue that the Thai government has made a mistake in forcing them to give up their patents.
If this goes on, the drug company will reconsider whether they will introduce new products into the Thai pharmaceutical market. If they hold or stop introducing new products, this means a tremendous effect in the healthcare system of Thailand.
Im herself has had her own concerns, far from the distant dispute between governments and drug companies.
Some people at school teased me and told me I shouldn't play with them, saying, "Don't come near." It was only some people, though. I didn't like it when people said it to me, but it doesn't happen anymore.
Now she says she works hard at school and has already decided on a career as a doctor.
I'm joined in the studio by John Ungpakorn, who's a social campaigner and a former member of the Thai Senate, and also by Edward Kelly, a lawyer specialising in drug, patent laws and intellectual property. Gentlemen, welcome to 101 East. John, let me begin with you. There are 80,000 people like Im in Thailand getting treatment, but almost 500,000 people who are actually HIV positive. And the Thai government says this is actually a medical emergency. Is it that bad? I mean, does it qualify for special attention?
I believe it does, because in fact we need to provide antiretroviral drugs to about 200,000 people of those 600,000, and more will need them.
And why are those people not getting those drugs?
At the moment, we've only just managed to start getting accelerated access to antiretrovirals to those who need them. Now, most people who are informed and come for treatment can get these drugs, but many are starting to get resistant to the first-line drugs. They will require second-line drugs, which are much more expensive.
The point here, Edward, is that the people who need the treatment are the people who can't afford the treatment, and the Thai government is unable to provide the treatment because of the problems surrounding patent law. Is that a fair expression of the problem?
I think you're linking a cause and effect that probably isn't there. The fact is, patents and access are not really related to each other. And if you look at the experience in many countries, for example, India, before 2005, India had probably the most developed generic drug production program in the world, with the Ranbaxy and Dr. Reddy's and Cipla, and they had no patent law on the books, so there were no patents in India. And at that time, only 1% of the Indian population with HIV was able to get medicine. So the problem is not necessarily related to patents. The problem is a much larger problem, which is related to infrastructure.
All right, let me just put that to John. Is that the case?
That's not really true now. There is much more access to antiretrovirals all over the world, in developing countries in Africa and Asia, due to the immense generic production, including generic production in India, particularly after the Doha Agreement in 2001, which allows, it's true in the past, many developing countries couldn't produce these drugs generically themselves, but now they're allowed to import these drugs from countries like India.
It's a strange situation that we can't even define the nature of the problem. There are some 10 million people dying every year because they can't get access to drugs. Why is that happening then, if it's not a legal and theoretical issue?
Well, again, I return to the issue of infrastructure. In Thailand, unfortunately, we have one of the lowest doctor-to-patient ratios in the world. It's a fact that people who need drugs very often don't have access to basic infrastructure, physicians, hospitals, clinics.
That may well be true, but it doesn't actually answer the question of should Thailand's government be allowed to manufacture drugs that will save people's lives.
Thailand's government is manufacturing drugs that save people's lives. The Thailand Government Pharmaceutical Organization, the GPO, has manufactured a very successful
Why is Abbott boycotting
therapy.
sending any drugs into Thailand? That's a remarkable step for a drug company to take.
Well, again, you're mixing up the issues here. The issue with Abbott is an issue of principle. Abbott makes a product called Kaletra that is a result of more than 15 years research, more than $800 million in investment, and chemical compound that was investigated from one of 10,000 different chemical compounds, and they've brought that investment into Thailand, and in the last 18 months they've offered to reduce the price twice, and yet the Thai government has refused to consider further negotiations and has essentially stopped discussing the matter with them and decided to go ahead with a compulsory license, not on the claim that there's an emergency. There was no claim by the Thai government that there was an emergency here. The claim was that they didn't have enough money in their health care budget. Why didn't they have enough money in their health care budget? The reason is after the coup, the new military leaders who were installed gave themselves a raise across the board of $11 million.
No, Ed, you've got to stop for a second
spending,
there. Excuse me, Ed, please stop for a moment there and let John address the issue of principle, he says. Is it an issue of principle?
Let me make it perfectly clear first. Compulsory licensing is perfectly legal. It's allowed under the World Trade Organization TRIPS agreement. Thailand has not broken any international agreement. It is acting within its rights completely. Many other countries carry out compulsory licensing, including Canada for ciprofloxacin after the anthrax attacks in the US. Countries in Europe regularly carry out compulsory licensing. Malaysia and Indonesia have done it in 2004 regarding AIDS drugs. And the fact is that in Thailand, we had over 500,000 people die of AIDS when we didn't have the right number of antiretrovirals. And now the death rate has dropped by 70% because of our production of antiretrovirals. But now we need the second-line drugs. And the fact is that the Abbott withdrawal of licensing of life-saving drugs is morally reprehensible. It's blackmail. It's holding the Thai public to ransom, not giving them life-saving drugs because Abbott is angry that Thailand has acted within its rights according to the World Trade Organization.
Let's take that opportunity to take a very brief break. Gentlemen, stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. You're watching 101 East. Stay with us.